Hi everybody, it's Jenny from the Missouri Star Quilt Company. This is an amazing day. It is time for block 10, and this is our last block that we are working on. Ta-da! For the middle of our quilt right here. It's our medallion block, if you will, and I feel like we've kind of saved the best for last because the Missouri Star is a wonderful quilt block, and it's obviously what we named our company after. So you should all have month 10, and this is month 10 right here, and we are going to open it up. And one of the fun things about the Missouri Star block is that you're going to learn several different techniques in making this block that will help you in other things that you're quilting. First, you're going to have your little pattern. Then we're going to have some 10-inch squares in here. And because we are using pre-cuts, because we are using 10-inch squares, there is going to be a little bit of waste. So normally if I were to make this block, I would use yardage because we're cutting them into 6 1/4-inch squares, and you're going to feel like there's, quite a bit of waste around the side, but it's way easier to send some of these blocks out to you in a 10-inch block than it is in yardage. So that's what we've decided to do. And first I'm going to take 4 of these 10-inch squares like this, and I'm going to count them and make sure, because we only have 8 and we need 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And we're going to cut, the first cut we're going to make on these is we're going to cut these into 7-inch squares and cut them once on the diagonal. So I'm going to trim off my little edge right here, my little pinked edges, so that I get a nice clean cut. And I'm going to come over here 7 inches, so 5, 6, 7, and make a cut. And this I'm just going to put back in my box. Somebody asked me today, I made a mistake, will I get more fabric? The fabric is pretty generous in these, so if you've made a mistake in one block, hang on till the next one. You may get enough to just fix it up. Also, it doesn't hurt to sew a little seam in a, if you need a piece that's bigger and you have two smaller pieces, just go ahead and sew a little seam in there so that it's the size that you need and cut it. No one's ever going to notice if you have an extra seam in there. So again, I'm going to go 5, 6, 7 and make a cut on this square. And then this is going to be some leftover. And then we're going to take this and we're going to cut it diagonally corner to corner. Just like that. And then we're going to stack these on top of each other and put them up here. So our next 4 background squares, we are going to cut those in. Those are going to be our corner squares right out here. And those squares are 6 1/4. And again, count to make sure, because if you cut all 4 of them at once, it will save you a lot of time. Now, if you're having trouble cutting 4, then you probably need to change your rotary blade. And one of the ways you can get a little bit longer life out of your rotary blade is if you, flip that blade over. Before you toss it in the garbage, flip that blade over and we'll be able to get more cuts out of it. And so I'm going to trim this off, and then I'm going to trim, I know my ruler is 5 inches, so I'm going over 1 inch for 6 and then 1/4. And so I'm making sure that these blocks are 6 1/4 in the corner. And this is leftover. And then we're going to turn this and do the same thing. I'm going to cut off my little edge right here. Make sure that I have a nice clean edge. And then I'm going to cut 5, 6 1/4. And these are our corner blocks. So we're going to set those 4 aside as well. Now we're going to take we have this chartreuse color and this peacock color, and we have this orange color. And the peacock color is our middle right here. So we're going to take the peacock and the gray, and we're going to put those right sides together like this. And I'm just going to set those over here for right now, because we're going to take our other 2 colors and we're going to put those right sides together. Let me press this a little bit so it's nice and flat. And we're going to cut this into 4 5-inch squares. So because this is a 10-inch piece and our little peaks are tiny, we are not going to trim those off. We're just going to lay our ruler right on the edge, and we're going to cut it right in half to make 4 5-inch squares. And we're going to leave those facing each other. All right, so now I'm just cutting this once horizontally, once vertically. It's going to give us 4 5-inch squares, and I'm going to stack those right here. And then all our cutting is done for our block. I'm going to iron these two. Now for these two, this is our middle block, and this is a super easy way to make half square triangles. And if you follow me at all, you know I like to do it this way. This is one of my favorite ways. So we're going to lay them right on top of each other, and we're just going to sew all the way around the square. So 1/4 inch all the way around the square. And we're going to sew down one side, and then flip it and go down the next side. And one more side here. Now we've sewn this completely closed, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take our ruler, and you've got to have one that's at least 15 inches long so that it will go corner to corner, and we're just going to cut this on the diagonal both directions. Like this, and then like this. So corner to corner. And now we have 4 half square triangles, and here's our half square triangles right here. And we're going to press those to the dark side. So put your dark color on top and lay them down here. You can set all your seams at one time, like this. And then we're just going to pick up that dark color and roll them back. And pick it up and roll it back, and pick it up and roll it back. All right. Now, we're going to look in our pattern. I know I haven't done that yet, but I have this down pretty good. And so we're going to look at what these should measure at the end. And these should be squared to 6 1/4, just like our corner ones. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a square ruler, and I have a block lock here, but any square ruler with a diagonal works. And we're just going to fit this up on here like this, and we're going to trim all of these to 6 1/4. And so on here, I can just move this down so that I'm in the 1/4 inch line here and the 1/4 inch line, and we're going to trim off this edge. Just like this. And we're going to do this to all 4 of our blocks. So the block lock has this little ridge in here, and you can nest it up to your seam. And this one I'm going to have to trim both sides, because if it moves beyond 6 1/4 at this point, then you're going to have to flip it around. So I'm going to trim this side, and then I'm going to flip around my other side, and I'm going to nest this into 6 1/4 right here on these edges, and then just trim off this side. So there's that one. Here's our next one. And sometimes it works out just perfectly, sometimes not so much. So we just do what we can. This one I can actually trim just on one side. And then this one, let's see him. All right, we've got 6 1/4 here and here. Nope, I'm going to have to turn him around. So here's our one side. And I never know why that happens. You know, people always say, well, how do you do that just the very first time? I'm like, I'm just not sure. I end up squaring, and that's okay. All right. So here's our 4 pieces now. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sew the grays together in the middle. And so this makes our first big square in a square block, which you can see right here. It makes this block right here. All right, so now we're going to sew this together like a 4 patch. So I'm going to lay these 2 pieces together and match my edge up here and match my edge down here. And I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch down the side and 1/4 inch down this side. And I'm sewing these through so that when I'm done, I can just flip it open and sew it right together. So now I can open these up right here and just lay them on top of each other and sew them together. Make sure you're lined up at the top, and then pause a minute and get your middle seam nested. Now you'll notice when you cut half square triangles this way, they are cut on the bias. A lot of people are afraid of the bias. I didn't know, I was a clothing sewer first, so clothing sewers love the bias. I didn't know to be afraid of that. And so I use the bias a lot, but just be careful. Don't pull Don't stretch. Just let the sewing machine do its work and you won't have any trouble at all. And it is a big time saver. Now I also know that if these squares didn't fit, I could actually make them fit because I have a little bias. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of spray starch on this and press it open. And that will also help the bias retain its shape. And so this is the very middle of our block right here. And we're on to the star legs. So for our star legs, we have these pieces right here that are laying right sides together. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take all of these squares and we're going to sew just the sides, only the sides. And we're going to do this to all of our pairs of squares. So this is a fun technique for making quarter square triangles. So we're going to go, I'm just going to chain piece all of them, one after the other. Make sure they stay lined up. Some of mine have scooched a little bit, but that's okay. I relined them up. Now I'm going to flip this whole chain around and sew the other side. So we're only sewing the sides on these. And one more out here. There we go. Now what we want to do is we want to clip these apart, and we're going to keep them in sets of 2. So I'm just clipping these apart right here, and I'm going to stack these 2 up, and I'm going to stack these 2 up. Now the trick for this is that one set of these is going to be trimmed diagonally this way, and the other set has to be trimmed diagonally the opposite way. So whichever way you want to, it doesn't matter. It matters that they're opposite. So I have my 2 stacked on top of each other. And if you're nervous about stacking 2, just do them one at a time. And I'm going to just take mine and corner to corner it and trim it diagonally this way. And then I'm going to, and I like to do these at the same time so that I'm actually very aware of which direction I'm cutting it. So these then I'm going to lay this way. And I'm going to cut these the opposite, corner to corner. And then when you open these up, you'll see that they are all going a different direction. So I'm going to stack mine like this, and all the oranges should be on the left side of this one, because you're going to need one of each of these for the legs. And then I'm going to open these up, and all the oranges should be on the right of this one. And they are. Isn't this a cool little method? All right, so here's this one. We're going to press all of these to the orange side, and we're going to, I'm just going to lay them out here and make sure they're all going the right direction. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to press these, and I'm going to just bring them over here and roll them back to that orange side, like this, and like this. And then this one as well, we're pressing to the orange. And we're going to leave them in separate piles, and now come our 7-inch squares that we cut diagonally once. Now those come into play, and we're going to add a stack to each one of those, and we're going to sew those together. Now we obviously have a center seam on our quarter square, and we need a center seam to match it with on these. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my square like this, and I'm going to fold it to point, and I'm going to finger press a little crease right there. And that's going to give me a line to put my seam on. And we're just going to lay these on here. Now they should be a little bit, your colored piece should be a little bit smaller than your white background piece. And we are going to just sew those right down the side like this. And we're going to do this to all 8 of these. And I'm going to do this one side first, and I'm going to get them apart and fold my crease line. Lay my seam on there, stitch across. You want to make sure they stay pretty well lined up along that center cut, and that will keep your block fairly square. I wonder if I can finger press too. I didn't know if I could do 2 at one time. All right, there we go. And one more here. So don't stress while you're doing this. This is a fun new technique and a great way to do this. And we're going to trim all these up. All right, there's our one side. And I'm going to cut these apart and make a little stack of them on my ironing board. Actually, nope, we're not going to iron them open yet. So don't iron open yet. And I'm just going to sew the other side. All right, so I've got a middle there on a couple and a middle on a couple more. I'm going to get those apart just like that, and then we can go right down the side of these. So lay your little seam on the middle, and then sew right down the side. Making sure you stay pretty true to your 1/4 inch. All right, one more. We've only got 2 more to go here. Line it up on the center. Here's our last leg. We're on our last leg. We're on the last leg of this block, and this is the last block we have to do for the quilt. Pretty exciting right now. All right, so now I'm going to cut these apart, and then we're going to square them. So for squaring any block that has a center seam, a quarter square triangle like that, this Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer is really my go-to. It's just my favorite. They don't come in 1/4 inches. We're going to be squaring these to 6 1/4. So you just have to remember that this is a 6 1/2 right here, and that the 6 1/4 is just a little bit on the other side of that seam. And so I kind of just like to lay mine just a little bit off that seam. And then I line up this center line right here with my stitch line. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim these to 6 1/4. And if you want, you can actually press them open and square them with any regular square ruler too. Just remember that they're squared to 6 1/4. And so I'm gonna do this one. Because there's not an actual line, I'm going to press this one, and then I'm going to actually look at it on the square to see, how close I came and see if that little trick works, and then we will know if I can actually do that. So yeah, that actually really worked for me, and it's almost exact. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. There's lots of different tools out there. There's different tools because we all have different brains. So look for the tool that makes sense to you. It will, because if you have a ruler or something that you struggle to use, when you look at it, you can't see, the lines or the grid, or there's too many lines, or you have to look really hard, or you have to put painter's tape. That's not a great ruler for your brain. And I know you guys have heard me say that before, but we all have our own brains, and we all have to figure out what works best for us, and it's going to be different for everybody. Oh, I got a little bit of a hanger-oner there. And as soon as I get these cut, I'm going to lay them over to my ironing board so that I can go ahead and iron them open when I'm ready. I seem to have a little hanger on every single one on that side. I must not be pressing hard enough on that side. Ooh, this one is barely any to cut. All right, now we'll go to the bigger one, or the other ones, the other side. And I'm going to put my ruler on that line and there we go. That one is almost exact. Let's see. On my center line and on my bottom. And the lines I'm matching up are my seam lines. My seam lines have to match up, my stitch lines have to match up with their stitch lines. There we go. And you just want to take your time with this part because you just want to make sure that you're pretty squared up, you're pretty good to go. All right, so now we're going to press these open. And I am going to, actually on these, I think I'm going to press to the lighter side because there's a double seam on that other side. It wants to lay that way. And see how on this one I've got this little kind of hump thing going there. That's because there's a little bit of bulk there. But if I press it the other direction, it will lay flat. So I'm going to press it the other direction. I'm going to let the seam decide that it wants, what way it wants to go, which means I'm going to have to like coax it now that I've already pressed it once. So I'm going to coax all of these into submission. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press these all to the lighter side, which is a bit unusual, but it will work. And it will make our block lay much nicer. All right, let me see which way I did this one. All right, I did this to the dark side, so I'm going to roll that up to the light side. All right, so now what we're going to do with these is we are going to sew these together in pairs. Now you still want to make your stacks like this. So we have 4 stacks this way and 4 stacks this way. And what I remember, my little mantra for putting these legs together is that, actually I'm going to switch sides on these, is that my background goes to the middle and the orange goes to the top. And so I'm going to sew all these sets of these together in 2s. Like this. And we're going to do all 4 of them this way. And so again, I'm just going to turn these to the middle, orange to the top. And I make that check every time, every single time. And you should have 4 sets of star legs. And here's one more. And one of the things that is nice is because we square all these blocks, they really go together very nicely. All right. So now 2 of these are going to go around our center block and 2 are going to have our corner blocks sewn to the edges. So I'm going to do that first, just because I like to have those done, because once you get those 2 center legs on, you are ready to put the whole thing together. So I'm going to go ahead and sew a corner block to the corner of 2 sets of my legs. So I'm going to sew one side on this side right here. And then I'm going to flip this around and add the other one to the other end. So that one is done, and now we're going to do this one. Remember to get your pieces right sides together. And then right sides on this one. Line it up along the edge, sew 1/4 inch. All right, so I'm going to set those there. These 2 I'm going to press open. right here. All right. So now we have our 2 legs done and our 2 end pieces done, and we're getting our middle square here, and we are going to put 2 legs on these 2 sides just like this, and then these outer pieces are going to go on the top and on the bottom. And just with a few more seams, our block's going to be done. So let's start with these side legs on this big center square, like this. I'm going to take a few stitches, match up my center square. This is another one of those places, if you don't want to lose those points, make sure that you look where your stitches crossed and that you sew to the seam side, right on that, or to the seam side. And there's pretty good amount of room on these, so you don't lose your points. And even if you do lose your points, seriously, no one's ever given a quilt back to me because I didn't have perfect points. So don't stress about it. Do the best you can. There we go. And then this side right here. All right. So now I'm just going to press these open right here and take a look at my points. And these points look pretty good to me. I don't really stress too much about the points. It's just one of those things where I'm like, I look at the overall. If it really bothers me like 3 times, then I will take it out and fix it. But if not, I'm not going to worry about it. All right, so now you can see we have this big side piece ready to go on here. And we're going to lay it on here. So the places you want to look at, you want this seam to match up, you want this seam to match up, and you want this seam to match up. So what I'm going to do, you can pin it if you want. I'm going to just start here, take a few anchoring stitches, and then I'm going to go to that first junction and make sure that it's nice and nested and that I can't feel nothing in between those 2 seams. They're just nested nice and tight. And one of the reasons I did not iron this first is because I wanted to make my seams go the way I wanted them to. If you want to iron first, make sure your inside seams go out and your outside seams go in, or vice versa. Either way works. You just want to make sure that they're opposite, and then they'll nest. On this one, I just kind of like doing it as I go along. All right, let's see, what did I do? I did outside on that one. So, and you want to make sure they're the same. So if you have one seam that is going out, you want the other one to go out. Actually, even that doesn't really matter, honestly. As long as you can press it so it's nice and flat, we're going to be happy with it. All righty. So here's our next leg, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. What we're looking for is a flat block. There we go. Oops, there. Nope, just a thread that caught. Just wanted to make sure that I still had bobbin thread. That's the worst, to run out of bobbin thread. Like right in the middle of your block. Or actually, it's worse when you run out of it like after sewing like 84 blocks. That's the worst. That happened to Misty the other day. Oh my gosh. All right. Hey, look at this. This looks pretty good, doesn't it? All right, let's press that. So it's nice and flat. And I'm going to go ahead and use some best press on here. And just... Oh, this is a gorgeous block. And go ahead, somebody on the MSQC All-Stars the other day put up a post, and I have to say I loved it. She said that she hadn't sewn very much, but how proud she was of herself when she finished a block. And I just think that's so cool. I mean, it's okay to look at something you've done and just go, you know what, that is really good. And be proud of yourself for these little accomplishments. I think I just loved that. All right, take a look. This is our last block. This is block 10. Next time, we're going to put all the pieces together, and you will have a quilt that is ready to go to the quilter. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. Obviously, I love the Missouri Star. Missouri Star, it's a much easier block. It's one of those blocks that looks like you worked really hard, but it comes together so quick and easy. And I can't wait to see you next month when we put all of this together. You guys have a good month, and we'll see you soon.